for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here today. I am an intern here at the GIC. Before the talk begins, please make sure your cell phones have been turned off or switched to silent mode. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever heard about renewable energy? I would guess most people have heard about it from the news, books, or other media. Renewable energy is derived from natural processes that are provided constantly. It refers to electricity and heat generated through a variety of methods. Now, I will introduce today's speaker, Gariepy. He has been an inventor and engineer for 20 years, and he was also a United States Marine Corps pilot for 10 years. He was the original creator of Internet Callback Service and holds the original patent application for the Internet telephone. Let's welcome our speaker with a big round of applause.
Okay, lovely picture. Good afternoon. I am Don Gariepy. I'll be talking about renewable energy. Now, everybody knows we have this problem because we're burning fossil fuel, oil and gas to produce our energy. They're in limited supply. Eventually they will run out. Smoke is hard to breathe. Air is hard to see through. Well, everybody knows about that, but I don't think everybody knows how we got here and how we're going to get out. That's the important part. I had this thing here on my introduction, but they already introduced me. I'll pick up at the end here. After I was doing inventions in the States, we came to live here in Korea in 2002. And I was an English teacher in Daejeon for 3 years. So I know some of you are teachers, so I've been a teacher for a short time. I've been working on renewable energy now for about 5 or 6 years. And I spent about 6 months in 2011 over on Puget Sound, dropping pipes down into the ocean to develop a new idea. If we have time on the end of this thing, I'll talk a little bit about that, because it's a personal note about the type of thing that a person does to develop a new invention. Now I'm back in Korea, and this is a really good place. Korea is really a good place to do renewable energy. The Ministry of Knowledge Economy is going to spend $1.1 trillion this year on new green projects. That's up from 800 last year. And that's a really big investment. That's a good thing. Now, green energy is particularly important for us here in Korea because all of our crude oil and natural gas comes from someplace else. So we have a serious problem here. If anything ever interrupts our imports, we are not going to be functioning as a technical country for a while. So that is why we have so many good examples of tidal power, solar power, wind power that you can look at here in Korea. And this actually is the right way to do it. We have never had just one source of energy, and we are not going to have just one source of energy in the future. There's going to be particular needs, particular places, particular opportunities. And starting with the tidal power, which is number 2 picture, we have the biggest tidal power project in the world. It's located at Siwa Lake, which is up on the coast near Seoul. Now, tidal power is a good investment. It's a reliable thing. Tide comes in and out every day. Sheila has a 16-foot tide, which is pretty big. And in the springtime, 26 feet. That's a lot of energy in one place. And Sheila is kind of a special place because it is not just a tidal power project. Somebody did a lot of work on this. Sheila is a tide power project. It's an agricultural project. It's a flood control project. And it is also a road. It's part of the highway system. The way that this place works, there's a bay in here. It's that way. And this road is built across the front of the bay. It serves as a container for the tide. And it was built in order to produce a highway. It's kind of like the Great Wall of China. It's got a wall that slants up like this, flat top. You can drive your car over the top of it. So this one project is taking care of quite a number of things, and it is a little unusual as tide power projects go because it only works one way. It works when the tide is coming in, but not when it is going out. When it is going out, they regulate the flow so as to maintain a water level in the lake behind that wall. We have two of those in Korea, actually. We have another one further down the coast. It works pretty much the same way. There's 10 turbines right here and 10 sluice gates right there. And it generates 250 megawatts when it's in operation. Now, in addition to the tidal power project, we have wind power. Wind power is about one of the oldest powers that we've ever used. That's a wind-powered vehicle. We've used those for hundreds of years, maybe thousands, back to the beginning. That's another wind power object right there. That one is probably from Holland, I can tell by the tulips. The kind of wind generators that we use now are commercial tools like this one. Now, this wind generator is worth about 2 megawatts. It's a $3 to $4 million investment. And it has a really good design because when you install this generator, it has a very small footprint. You can put this in the middle of a farmland and you can grow crops underneath. So it is a non-interfering thing to put into the environment. Some people do not like to look at it, and they don't like to listen to it, but that's another story. The generator itself is kind of friendly to the environment where it goes, and they can be put in most anywhere. Now, these things have an investment of about $6,000 a kilowatt. That's kind of high as generators go, but it's a new thing and it's experimental, and in time it will probably smooth out to a lower price. The generator that we put in for 2 megawatts, it'll run at about 20 to 50% of that because of the fact that the wind changes. So you hit an average with it. But it's not a problem. It's connected to a large grid, and the energy will be very welcome there. We also have solar power, and these can be located anywhere. Oh, that's a construction picture on the wind generator. I was impressed when I first saw these things because of the large size. In my mind, you think of a wind generator, I think of a farming appliance, but this is a huge thing to put in. Takes very special equipment to do it. But once it's in there, I think it is permanent. We have tidal, we have solar, and also we have, we have tidal and we have wind. Also we have solar power located everywhere. Solar power is in, we have a large station in Jolanando near to where I live. And that's at Shannon Photovoltaic Power Station. It's 24 megawatts. This is very large for this type of a solar power station. It produces enough energy in the course of a year that would support 10,000 homes if they were just living off of this one thing. Now this type of solar power, this is what you normally think of when you think of solar power. You think of the silicon cell. But this type of silicon cell, it's a good invention, runs about 5 hours out of the day. But we have still bigger solar power. This is a very commercial thing. This is a large-scale solar power unit. These are not silicon cells, these are mirrors. The mirrors reflect the sun's light up to the top of that tower, and this thing drives a steam engine generator, just like a regular power plant. You can get hundreds of megawatts out of an installation like that. I don't see those very often. Mostly I see the silicon cell application. Now, these are the three power sources that are the most popular green energy ideas happening now. There's a whole worldwide industry putting these things in. And in our case, here in Korea, we've gained 678 megawatts of electricity. That saves a lot of CO2. It's a welcome thing to have in the power grid. It's a good idea. But this is not going to replace oil. There is a problem with these three sources. It's not really a problem right now, but it would be later. If right now these things are 3% of our power grid, so when the wind stops, when the sun goes down, when the tide is not flowing, it doesn't make any difference. The power grid makes up for the difference. The other generators eat up that space, eat up those customers. The reason I say these units will not replace oil is that because they are not continuous, if they are more than 10% of the system, the rest of the system cannot make up for them when they stop. If they're 20% of the system, the rest of the system is going to go down. We had a really large power outage once on the East Coast, worked just that way. We lost a big generator, and it took the whole system down. It was out for hours. But right now, this is not a problem, and it isn't going to be. The reason I mention it is that sometimes people speak of these things as a replacement for oil, and it's not going to happen for that reason. They cannot be added beyond about 10 to 20% of the system. So, I have to read this or I'll forget my pieces. So I am sorry for the paper. If I was like Obama, I'd have a nice thing in front of me that tells me what to say. But this works for me. So, speaking practically, this is a serious problem. We should think about it. We should do something with it. Speaking practically, if these things are not the answer, what is? What is the answer? Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what we have before we talk about replacing it. Now we have right now 80 million kilowatts of installed generation in Korea. That's a big system. Got 50 million people living on that system. It took about 100 years to build that thing. Now, we've been building green energy projects for maybe 10 years. We've made a 3% addition to our system. What that means is in 300 years we could come up to the level of the system. It's a really big thing to bite off. And in addition to all the power plants, we are also running cars and trucks and airplanes and ships. All of those are oil-burning things, and all of those are critical to our operation. We don't run without them. So a suggestion. How about if we keep the power plants and the airplanes and the trucks and the cars and change the fuel? We have a problem with oil burning. Change the fuel. I'm sure that would work. Now, how can I be sure of something we've never done? Good question. I can be sure that we can run our cars on alcohol because we used to do that. And I can be sure that we can replace diesel oil with vegetable oil because we used to run our diesels on vegetable oil. We have done this. Why aren't we doing it now? Well, we made a mistake 100 years ago. All of us, we made a mistake 100 years ago. And we've been running on the wrong fuel, and we built a lot of machinery to do that. A lot of time has been spent on it. But, good news is we can change that. Let me explain about this wrong fuel thing because it's the reason why we got here. And it kind of indicates the way out. All of these things happened around 1900. That's when we made our choice. Does anybody know who that guy is? Who is that? He's an important guy. He is one of the people that built the world we live in today. Ford. That's Henry Ford, right. Henry Ford. He became very famous and rich in America by making cars. Now, Henry Ford did not invent the car. What Henry Ford did invent was how to make them better than anyone else. And also, Henry Ford really deserved to be a millionaire. He was a good person. Henry didn't just invent the car. He invented paying his workers fairly, which meant twice what anyone else was doing back then. Also, when you became a permanent employee at Ford's factory, you went on profit sharing. You got a share of that factory. Nobody else did that at this time. So that's one of the things Henry did. The other car makers were making expensive cars for rich people. But Henry didn't do that. Henry made cheap cars for ordinary people. In the year 1900, you could buy a Ford car, $500. And that Ford car would run on alcohol. And that was not an accident. Henry chose the alcohol for a good reason. The farmers that bought his cars, they had alcohol. They made their own alcohol. They made it from the fruits and vegetables that they grew, from food scraps. So people had been making alcohol for years. They can drink it. They can light lamps with it. They can clean things with it. Now they can run cars with this alcohol. Alcohol is clean burning. Henry said alcohol was the fuel of the future because it was conveniently made, locally made. You could make your own if you were a farmer. How about people that were not farmers and had to buy their alcohol in a store? What was the price? How does it compare with gasoline? Well, This sounds like a simple question, but it is normally very hard to answer because fuels are very important. They have a lot of taxes in their manufacture. They have a lot of subsidies in their use. To answer the simple question about price is usually very hard. But we are lucky in this case. In 1906, President Roosevelt took all the taxes off of fuels. And he did that for just this reason, so you could see the price. Alcohol, 14 cents a gallon. Gasoline, 22 cents a gallon. Now, we didn't see that price for very long. The taxes went right back on after a few years, and we never saw them gone again. That one look 100 years ago was the last time we ever saw an honest price on alcohol versus gasoline. So, important question. Around 1900, we made this choice. Why are we spending more to have less? And there's a good answer to that. Does anyone know who that gentleman is? This is a very unique person. One of the people that actually has made the world we live in today. That's John D. Rockefeller. John D., owner of Standard Oil, very capable person. He was born in an average middle-class situation, and when this picture is taken, when he's in middle age, he owned 90% of the oil on planet Earth in those days. 90%. He has a net worth of $600 billion. This is in 1900, when money is worth like 100 times what it is today. Bill Gates is only $60 billion. And Bill Gates is a nice guy. Bill Gates lives in our area. He obeys the same laws as everyone else. But John D. is different. He can tell the government what to do. We passed an income tax bill in this time period, and all of us paid income tax, but John D. never did. Now, the real reason we're using gasoline rather than alcohol is because the petroleum producers are bigger and better organized. And they have done a much better job than the alcohol producers of getting favorable taxes and subsidies. It's normal economics. Corporations like Standard Oil have done a much better job than individuals have. The alcohol is produced by individual farmers, by small corporations, or was in those days. So they actually did a good job of management to change the price. And for that reason, we wind up using gasoline instead of alcohol. That's the story on alcohol. Let me talk a little bit about burning vegetable oil instead of petroleum oil. Vegetable oil was the fuel for diesel engines in Europe in this time period. And that was not by accident. That was because of Rudolf Diesel. This time you'll know who that guy is. That's Rudolf Diesel. Diesel engines, most efficient thing in the world. We still use them everywhere. And he invented that engine, and no one has invented a better one since. He is the primary good engine maker in the world. And he is also the first ecological inventor. And the reason why I say that is that he purposely made his engine to run on vegetable oil. When Rudolf graduated from Polytechnic in Munich, Germany, he's a German, the only engine around was steam engine. And they burned oil and they burned coal, and they had all the problems we have today, except maybe the atmosphere wasn't full of CO2 because they hadn't had enough time to fill it yet. Nobody was burning vegetable oil. Well, Rudolph decided he would make a more efficient engine. It would burn less fuel, do more work. That's a very good invention to choose. It's practical. Why? Because people want a very good engine. They know they have a problem with efficiency. He picks something which people will like. They will use it as soon as they see it. He makes his invention practical. And in addition to making an engine to run efficiently, he purposely made this to run on vegetable oil. So it would be produced by local farmers. It would not be trucked in from a great distance away, and it would be of low cost, clean burning, easy fuel to buy. Now, he had that in his mind when he got out of college. Now, inventing this engine is not an easy thing to do. It is 20 years out of this guy's life. 20 years from the idea to the engine. But he did it. He did it for one reason. The shop that he worked in believed in his idea, and they worked with him. And this was a hard thing to develop. He had his engine running for test in the shop where he worked, and he was developing it. And one day it blew up and took out a section of the building, put Rudolph in the hospital for a few months. But the people he worked for still had faith in it. And when he got out of the hospital, he went right back to work again. So, by 1898, he was done. He was very proud of his efficiency. In 1898, he put this engine in the Paris exhibition. People from all over the world could come and see it. And Rudolph was right there, and he impressed everybody with the high efficiency of his engine and the fact that it would run on vegetable oil, and everybody would have an easy fuel supply. People heard that, and they were really impressed with it. Now, one of the people at the Paris exhibition, Adolphus Busch, a very rich American person, he heard this explanation. He heard about the efficiency, he heard about the vegetable oil, and he approached Rudolph and he asked for a contract. Adolphus Busch bought a contract for sole manufacturing rights in North America for Rudolph's engine. And he paid him. He paid him $1 million for signing this contract. Manufacturing rights mean that Mr. Busch is the only person who can make a diesel engine in America, and Rudolph would get a percentage of each one that is made. Does anyone see something wrong with this? Rudolph didn't see anything wrong with it. He was very happy. Rudolph signed the contract, he took his $1 million, and he made engines. And by 1912, he had 70,000 diesels running all over the world. Very successful. Except for America. There were no diesels in America. Mr. Busch never made a diesel engine. What he had done actually was lock Rudolph out of America. Since he had the manufacturing rights, nobody else could make an engine there. So there were no peanut oil burning diesels in America, and there would never be for quite a long time. At any rate, Rudolph is doing good. And in 1913, he's a very busy fellow, because in 1913, all of the European nations are preparing for World War I. The French Navy is already on diesels. Germans want to buy them. England wants to buy them. Rudolph is a busy fellow. He's going back and forth from his home in Europe to England. He's talking to the British Navy. He has a factory being built in England. Busy time for him. And England is very important to him because England is prime ally of America. If he sells diesel engines to the British Navy, the Americans will buy them also. And the American government doesn't care about the contract, they will override the contract. So Rudolph is kind of happy about this, and he's a great success. And on one of his trips to England, he is coming back on the boat, and they go to wake him in the morning, knock on his door. No Rudolph. They search the boat. No Rudolph. 3 or 4 days later, another boat finds his body floating in the English Channel. Now that is the end of Rudolph. I do not believe that he was a suicide, but that is what they said at the time. He was very successful at that moment. Now, that may be the end of Rudolph, but it's not the end of the diesel engine. England did use those in World War I, and the U.S. Navy did copy and used them in that war. But as soon as the war was over, there were no diesels available for normal people in America. And it stayed that way. It stayed that way until the 1920s, when another inventor invented a version of the diesel that ran on petroleum oil. That was Mr. Cummins. So the Cummins diesel became the standard machine in America, burning petroleum oil. And after a while, everybody did that. The prices kind of adjusted. It was the right thing to do. So we wound up burning petroleum oil in these diesels pretty much for the same reason that we were burning gasoline in the car. Mr. Rockefeller did a much better job of managing us than we did of managing him. That's a long story, but that is how we came to be where we are now. Now the good news of this is that we can change to alcohol and vegetable oil. It's going to take a few years because it takes modification. Not so much to the machine, but to the supply. These things have to be grown. We are doing that now, actually. We are producing, here in Korea, alcohol, we're producing vegetable oil, and it is being mixed with the fuel. I think this year we're on 2%. We have a 2% alcohol addition to the gasoline. And over a period of time, that percentage can increase, and we will wind up 100% alcohol in our cars and 100% oil in the diesel. And it will happen in a gradual manner with no great problem to anyone participating in it. That is a good news. Now, when we think of growing our fuel, one of the big questions is, do we have enough land to grow it on? How is this going to look? Well, I have a friend that worked in biodiesel a few years ago, and I wrote to him on the email, and I asked George about this. He sent me a bunch of information. It turns out that the really best way to grow diesel oil is to grow algae. You do this in ponds and in pans. And if you, well, for example, if you have an acre of soybeans, you have 40 gallons of oil. If you take that same acre and you use it to grow algae in, the algae grows very fast. You don't just have one crop a year. You have a continuous supply. The algae is not worth 40 gallons of oil a year. It's worth 10,000 gallons. So I took a look in my internet, and I found that we actually have enough farmland in Korea to do this. It would take 50% of the farmland if we did that. Or 16% of the forest land if we could use that. Now, that's too big a change. I don't believe anyone would want to do that. It's possible, but it's not pretty. So I think what will happen is that that type of fuel production, will be a part of our energy supply, but not the whole thing. The really best way to generate green energy would be if we had something which was capable of producing high power and had a price somewhat similar to what we have now. Most of the newer things are considerably more expensive than our existing supply. Actually, there is an unlimited power source. I'll bet nobody knows who that guy is. That guy is George Claude, French person. George is a great inventor. Every time you pass a welding shop, those gases that are in the tank, they're refined from air. That's his project. George Claude is with us right here in this room. He invented the neon light. That was one of his inventions. And that photo taken in 1926 is the answer to our renewable energy needs. Because Claude invented something else. It's called ocean thermal electric conversion. And what this is, it's kind of a long name, it's called OTEC for short, because it's too long a thing to say. OTEC is a very good idea. The engine, or the ocean is much warmer on the surface than it is deep inside. You get maybe a 15 or 20 degree difference in temperature. If you take water from the deep ocean, you bring it up to the surface, you can take this temperature difference and you can run a heat engine, you can generate electricity with it. Now, this is not just a theory, this has been done. Mr. Claude did this in Cuba. He did it on Côte d'Ivoire, and he also tried Brazil. It's been done in Hawaii. There's one problem with it. It needs a little help. The reason I'm explaining this is that this is kind of my interest in it. The OTEC system has one problem in it, and that's money. And it's caused by a particular reason. Okay, try the next picture. No, not this one. I want the one on the OTEC generator in Hawaii. Let me take a look here. Try that one. No. Do you have the one with the little pictures on it? Remember the screen with the little pictures on it? Go back to the screen with the small pictures on it. Show them Korean. That one right there. That's that's an OTEC generator. That was made in Hawaii by Hawaii State several years ago. That particular generator sits out off of the island, and here's the problem with OTEC. What you're looking at is the engine part that is on the surface. Where all the money in OTEC is in a pipe. There's a pipe that goes down from the bottom of this boat 1,000 meters into the ocean. It's about 8 feet across. That's where all the money is in that project. Now this generator costs $3 million. And it's very fragile because that long pipe is easily broken. And typically what happens is the OTEC installation will last about a year, and the first big storm will take that pipe out. No more generator. Your $3 million have gone away. And for that $3 million, you're going to produce 20 kilowatts. That's not a good thing. Why? Because if you guys wanted to build a power plant, you could go out and buy 20 kilowatts. It will cost you $9,600 for a diesel electric 20 kilowatt generator. You cannot compete $3 million against $9,600. Nobody is going to do this. So OTEC is kind of a really good idea. There's a huge amount of energy available. But it's not going anywhere because it needs the long pipe. And the reason it needs the long pipe is that we do not have an engine that runs properly on a very low temperature difference. That engine that they're using here is running on a 20-degree temperature difference, and it just barely works. That's why they get so little power from it. What is really needed to make this idea practical is an engine that will operate on a low temperature difference. If you do that, you generate quite a lot of power, and you do not have a pipe that you're going to break in 1 year, and you do not spend $3 million to have your 20 kW. So that's actually my interest in this. My interest in this, what I'm working on right now, is to develop an engine that does that. An engine that will run properly on a 5-degree or less temperature difference. Now, this is not an easy thing. It has a lot of problems in it, which I'm not going to bore you with. But if that problem can be solved, then the OTEC generator will be available for everyone to use. And also it would be very practical right away. You would not need to build power and give it to the electric grid and send it to people. If you had an engine that would run on the low temperature difference, you could put it in a boat, and on the temperature energy between the warm air and the cold water, you could run that boat. So that's my interest in this particular thing at this time. I think of that as a practical engine. It's something that has a use, and people already know they need it. So I think it will be a thing that succeeds, presuming I can do it. End of speech.